Hello and welcome to At Home with the Hugheses. This is episode 5. We're in series 2. And if you're just joining us listening to this, there's a whole bunch of other episodes you can listen to. This series we've been looking at dealing with wounds of leadership. We've been looking at like a spiritual personal audit.
Lids and limitations.
What
was the other one?
We did a recap, some of the things we learned from our sabbatical.
Yeah.
And even if you've not listened to anything from series 1,
there's an abundance.
There's 8 episodes.
Oh my, giddy gumdrops.
So check that out. But Rach, today...
I love you're like saying it to me like I don't know.
Well, usually you don't.
I'm normally aware 5 minutes before.
No. Go on, how
Actually, we've come up with this one together. I don't feel like...
We have.
Yeah.
But how are you doing?
Oh, gosh. Do you know, I actually feel quite tired, honestly.
I can see you.
I
Watch
need my
out,
cup
people.
of tea.
You'll see your eyes
I might
glaze
No, your
talking.
conversation is so riveting that I will stay awake. But it is that we're recording this at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm getting a bit of
bedtime.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's the lag. I was built for a siesta.
You built for the sun.
Oh, I'd love to live in a siesta culture. I'd love that little afternoon nap.
Why don't we move to Spain?
Why don't we?
I'd love that.
I think we're meant to be here, but yeah, that would be nice. Get up early, do your day, little siesta, 2-3 in the afternoon, stay up late. I'd love that. But it's not going to happen, people, is it?
One day. Heaven, do you think heaven will be sunny all the time?
I
Will we
hope
get the
so.
seasons?
Ooh, because anyway, this is such a detour. So today...
But just quickly, the big thing in your life.
What is the big thing in my life?
Improving, isn't it?
There's nothing wrong with knitting. I keep telling you, it's like in your mind there's this hierarchy of hobbies, and because your hobby is golf, you think golf is like so, I don't know, sophisticated, and somehow me knitting, you like look down on me.
For those who watch to the end, we'll show everyone
what?
Your hat.
There's nothing to scoff about.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's a beautiful piece of craft.
There's a lot of people out there who are very worried Rachel's going to knit them a hat. You'd be like the Christmas jumpers. Oh no, Mum, please don't make me a Christmas jumper. Anyway, go on, no. Tell us about what we're going to discuss today.
I don't feel like I want to now. You've shut me down. We're going to be looking at this episode how to make big decisions. I mean, I say how to make. It's not like we're going to be giving you the ABC on how to make big decisions, but we were just thinking that is a part of life. It's a part of leadership that there come these moments in life where you have to make really key decisions, and discerning them is a big part of, I guess, discipleship essentially and leadership.
And very rarely is it completely obvious to these, and very rarely, like I remember I had this decision to make about moving to join a church in Watford, Soul Survivor, or staying at Sheffield University. And I remember praying and almost expecting an angel would turn up in my room, either wearing a Watford football shirt or a Sheffield Wednesday football shirt. And that never happened. And I had to make
quite specific, that expectation.
But I had to find other ways of navigating that decision. In the end, I decided to stay at University of Sheffield. But I think decision-making causes so much...
angst.
It does, and it's really hard. And you feel the pressure of it. And I think there are some practical things that can help us best navigate and make good decisions. Yeah,
and we were going to share maybe 2 or 3 examples of big decisions that we've had to make. I think also... obviously, if you're married and if you have children, you're factoring those things in. And so also we've had to navigate these decisions as a couple where, I mean, one particular example, we weren't on the same page for a number of months, if not years.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like if you, as a married couple, have a different sense of the direction? We'll come to that. Because again, biblical headship. What does that mean in the context? Your eyes lit up then, didn't they?
Biblical head. I've never ever heard you. mention that only other than in a sort of despairing,
That's not
disparaging way.
true.
No, yeah.
I think there's a way to understand
There
it
is,
and interpret
absolutely
it
right.
and live it in the context
Yes.
of a married couple.
Well, why don't we start with an example of a decision which was a major one for us as a family, which was moving to Birmingham to plant Gas Street Church.
From London.
From London, HTB. And we'd thought
just-
about church leadership for a while.
Yes.
Initially thought about ordination together. Stage of life, children, it wasn't going to work for you to get ordained. I got ordained, so I'm now a curate at HTB. HTB is in a season of church planting nationally, and we began to feel that was the call on us. But as to where to church plant, what that might look like, that was so open-ended. In fact, we had a really interesting opportunity in London to church plant.
We did.
That we never felt quite right about.
Yeah. And looking back, it wouldn't have been right.
No.
And so yeah, this was a big decision because it was a decision that involved relocating to another city. It meant...
Well, and for me, the challenge was relocating to a city I'd grown up in, Birmingham.
Yes.
And so sometimes you can feel like that's a backward
that
step.
wasn't actually a wholly positive thing, actually, for you, was it?
No, gosh, no.
No. Whereas for some, that might be. Because none of your family were here anymore or anything like that. But it also meant moving schools for our children. So it was a big move for... three of our children were in school at that point. One was just about to start nursery. And we didn't have our little girl. She wasn't born yet. So it was a big, big move. And also... new church, brand new church, starting a church from scratch. It was a huge decision, a big upheaval, which carried quite a lot of risk, to be totally honest. Because what if the church didn't work out? What if we turned out to not be very good leaders? And
I think for me, the leaving, or not leaving, but stepping aside a bit from leading worship, all the training, Worship Central, that felt like a really daunting thing to do.
And to be honest, leaving London, we both loved London. We loved living in London.
The narrative is you're at the epicenter of the world.
Nothing else matters if it doesn't happen.
You change the world. You move out of London, see ya.
Yeah, which is so wrong. Just to be clear.
Yes, but we kind of, that was slightly in us. So that was a fear of moving to the back. And even like I was speaking at a church in London just recently. All these people are like, wow, thanks so much for coming down from Birmingham.
All the way from Birmingham.
You're coming from, driving down and back in a day. And I'm like, it's like a 2-hour drive.
Yeah,
it's an hour, 20 minutes on the train. It's not like I'm flying
it takes that long to get from one side of London to the other. But it's a psychological thing, isn't it?
So
and we know, because we were in London. So, we remember that feeling.
What would you say then, looking at that decision, was some of the factors at play?
I don't mean to sound sort of overly spiritual, because of course there were also some very practical things, but I do remember the overriding feeling was, is this where God wants us? That was the priority. And we both felt that very strongly, that this wasn't like a career move. This wasn't like a house upgrade move, although we did end up initially in a really beautiful house.
Yeah.
This was a move about, where do you want us to serve God?
Well, can I, if I may, even backtrack from that? I think it started, obviously we knew this call to lead a church. We felt that, but that's exciting, and you've no idea where that could be. But I think we began to feel, maybe particularly me, a real frustration. And suddenly...
With where you were?
With where I was.
And that wasn't because where you were was bad?
No.
To be fair,
well, the spiritual way you describe it is a holy discontent.
Yeah.
Because actually everything around me, we loved HTB. We absolutely adore Nikki and Pippa. We were part of a really exciting, dynamic church. We really enjoyed London.
We had brilliant friends.
Great friends. That there was, I remember, and I remember really vividly, we'd come back from holiday, so it's kind of September, and I had a great holiday. But I suddenly came back to London, and I was like, I felt all at sea, confused, what's going on, and it really threw me. Everything felt unsettled, and I felt this just frustration, like I'm stuck. I feel suddenly a bit bored. Struggling to imagine the next 5 years. And this prophet guy, I was at this event, and he picked me out. Never met him, and he said these things. He said, basically, from September, you've been feeling at sea, and it's God unsettling you and preparing you. And he had this amazing phrase. He said,
You're feeling uncomfortable in a comfortable place.
You're feeling uncomfortable in a comfortable place, yeah. And that just helped me understand that actually God, and he said God is unsettling you and preparing you for something new. So suddenly that feeling was like, okay, this is God getting the roots ready to move. And then there was a few other prophetic things. But I've seen this a few times. I think with big decision making, or when it's maybe time for a career move or change of your role, when you feel bored and frustrated, sometimes there's practical reasons, but sometimes I think God uses that to get your attention, to cause you to lean at what's going on. And I think particularly when you suddenly feel lost or frustrated and everything around, it's not like it's changed, there's no finger to point at why you might feel that. I think God does that to unsettle us, to get our attention. So I think frustration can be a way God begins to get us ready to discern future.
And again, we've got to be careful, because you could have in that moment essentially sort of projected that frustration onto where you were. Like, oh, well, it's the leaders, it's the church I'm in, and of course, I would be lying if I said there weren't my moments where we got frustrated with, decisions that were made. That's not, we know there are our team here at Gas Street. They get frustrated with us. They get frustrated with the church. That's totally normal. And I think you did this really well, because what I saw is I didn't see you project it onto the leadership or onto the church. So, the reason I'm feeling frustrated and, confused and it was all their fault. You didn't do that. You took the time to really understand what was going on. And actually what was going on was, I think God's preparing us to lead our own thing.
Yeah, and that's the helpful thing, isn't it? That when you feel that frustration, actually, I mean, again, the timeline for us was 18 months before we actually moved. It was a long time. I think
so, yeah.
So the danger is, again, you make a knee-jerk reaction, a quick rush decision because you feel, but actually sitting into, okay, God, what are you wanting to say? How do we... So I think that's an important thing to recognise. Where are you feeling, what the emotions you're feeling.
And it's also worth saying that sometimes God calls you into a new season out of a season where you feel thriving and alive. Yeah. Like you don't, almost that feeling of frustration and discomfort isn't sort of always a prerequisite for a move, is it? Sometimes God surprises us and it's like, oh, right, okay, we're off now.
So I guess we're feeling that.
Yes.
You know, it's time to get ready to lead a church. I'd trained, so obviously done all the training, practical things, because that's another thing, isn't it? Getting yourself ready. We spoke to Nikki Gumbel about, I think we feel ready to lead. Mm-hmm.
And praise God, again, credit Nikki, HTB. We've heard too many stories of people that we know who have felt called to lead their own thing.
Yes.
And because they were under leadership that was unhealthy, insecure, toxic, what they were met with was not, amazing, we release you. Yeah. Go and do this thing. Yeah. What they were met with was, hostility, essentially. Disloyalty, you're abandoning the ship, And so I don't take it for granted that we had the honor and privilege of sitting under leadership.
No, Nikki and Pip were amazingly
Absolutely, so releasing,
generous,
and we're like,
and
you got
excited because it's part of the vision they had.
kingdom-minded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened then? Once we kind of knew that was where we wanted to go, I guess opportunities started to come away. We talked about London.
Yeah.
And then Birmingham came.
And we were not, humanly speaking, we were not interested in Birmingham. I think it's really important to say that.
Yeah.
We loved London. We really thought we were going to plant into London.
Yes, absolutely. And but I think what we did, and this is something I think is important in decision making, is to almost entertain everything.
Yeah, push the door.
Have the conversation. So we thought, okay, well, look, not sure about this, but let's at least go and meet with the Bishop of Birmingham. Amazing guy at the time.
And go to Birmingham. See what God might say.
Yes. And tell what happened when we... when we came to Birmingham?
Yeah, so we... Go on. Tell them. Yeah, so, I mean, we came up... It was January, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We're recording this, actually, in January, which is why it's pertinent. And it was miserable.
Oh, yeah.
It was grey. It was freezing. It was raining. Like, again, humanly speaking, Birmingham was not showing off that day.
Yeah.
And honestly, compared to London, purely aesthetic, like there are so many sort of iconic places and spaces, and you don't feel that in the same way in Birmingham. Now, I am now a huge supporter of Birmingham, and I won't hear anyone say a word wrong about it because I think it's an amazing place to live, and I'm so grateful to be here. But that's not where we were at.
No.
But again, and I think when you're walking with the Spirit, when your desire is to serve the kingdom, you become aware of what God is saying. And I actually think the kindness of God is that He really showed us by the power of His presence on that day. We just both had such a sense of excitement about the possibilities, that we sensed God was on the move. There was something already happening. Like just to be clear, we did not see ourselves as God's gift to Birmingham. Just to be clear, there are and were brilliant churches doing brilliant kingdom work in Birmingham. We just felt excited that we might be able to join in with what God was beginning to do, or had been doing.
I think what happened was we spoke to Bishop David and heard his vision for the city, and that excited us. Things like Birmingham being demographically the youngest city in Europe excited us. And walking around, you could feel the sort of energy of the place.
And regeneration, there's loads of regeneration happening.
And then I think there was something in my head. I think we can sometimes over-spiritualize geography.
Yes, agreed.
God's called me to this one special place. Now, sometimes absolutely God does that.
Yes.
You see that. But I think we came to the place, like there are people who need to hear about Jesus. There's a need and an ask from the bishop. There's an opportunity. Like, why wouldn't we? What would stop us? And so once we kind of came to that place, the next thing was, well, let's just keep pushing through the doors. And if a door closes, fine. But if they keep opening, then we'll take that as God's leading us into there. And that's kind of what happened, wasn't it?
It was.
We then, kept meeting up with the bishop, and an opportunity for Gas Street, the building, opened up and put an offer in. It was accepted, and
there was just a momentum, wasn't
needed
there?
to raise money for it, and that came in. And I remember when we started to ask people about coming, I was like, who's going to come to Birmingham? And you had this thing like, God's going to surprise us, and we need to ask like the best. And loads of people started to come.
Yeah.
The Drakes, the Herberts, the Hellebronts. I've started
The Summers, the Gortons.
Malsey.
Oh gosh, no. I'm trying to think who else came from London.
A whole bunch.
A whole bunch.
It was incredible. And so I think that was another sign, like once there's a bit of momentum, God's blessing on it, that gave us courage to to step out.
And then, you do then start to think practically like, okay, where are we going to live? And where are the kids going to go to school?
Yeah.
And God, again, there were bumps in the road, but God massively provided, opened up the doors, made it possible.
Yeah.
And any move is an upheaval, but there was always just a sense of excitement and a sense of rightness. And I think the other thing was that you and I were both just so firmly on the same page.
Yes.
Which was such a gift, actually.
And important to say, I think our friends and family
Yes.
were really supportive.
Yes.
And I think I've seen people do this, make decisions, key decisions, and when they do, they isolate themselves from people who really know them.
Yeah.
Maybe particularly I've seen it around the partner you're going to marry.
Yeah.
Or a career move. And I think that's dangerous. I think these big decisions, the people we love and trust in our lives, we need to draw them in. And we need to really listen to what they have to say. And the other thing I see which really concerns me in decision making is over spiritualizing things. I can think of a few examples of massive decisions made when people have questioned it. They say, "Well, God's told me."
Yeah.
Well, you can't say anything to that, and it's basically like, well, either God's told you or He hasn't, and you've got it wrong. But I think that as Christians, over spiritualizing decisions can be very, very dangerous. And of course, God does speak. But if God's speaking, there'll be other ways He speaks and confirms. And I think through friendships is really important.
Do you know, I always think those 5 CSs
Yes.
that Nikki talks about
On Alpha, yeah.
on Alpha are so helpful. I come back to those all the time.
Go on then.
Well, okay, so I can remember that. So there's common sense,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
God's given us a mind.
Yeah,
I love
God's
what
given us...
Craig Rochelle says
Don't know.
around decision. You're smart. Fix it.
Oh, I see, yeah.
God's given you minds.
Yeah. Does it make sense? Like,
Yeah.
And to be fair, sometimes God asks you to do things that don't make sense. So there is that little caveat.
Together.
They work together. So commanding Scripture, is it in line with what the Bible says? And for us, that was a yes.
Yeah.
Planting a church at the invitation of the bishop.
Carrying the gospel. Yeah.
Felt good. Biblical grounding for that. Communion of the saints. Is it communion of the saints? Is it
effectively like?
What do your friends say? Council of the saints.
You're very Catholic there.
Yes, sorry. Oh, look at that. Council of the saints. Again, like trusted people.
Yeah.
Do they say, this is a really good idea? Commanding, something spirit. What is it? Something spirit. Essentially, what do you feel? Do you sense the Holy Spirit stirring you towards it?
Yeah.
Like, is this... And again, I think for us, is it just 4? Is it 5? There's definitely 5. Oh, I don't know what the other one is.
Well, but the circumstantial signs.
Circumstantial signs, that's it.
And I think there are things that opened up, ease with buildings falling into place. Our kids got, again, looking back, actually quite amazingly into the school which many people had. So God was really in it all. But the other thing with a big decision like this, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think that's a danger where you somehow think that to make a big decision won't be, that God will save you from being
afraid. Fear can often be the litmus test. So it's like, if I feel afraid, it's not God.
Yes.
Or if there's an absence of fear, like peace, then it's God. I actually think, do I have a peace about it? Can be really misinterpreted.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? Because having a peace about something doesn't mean that there's an absence of, this is also really scary. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that phrase, do I have a peace about it, is helpful so long as you're not using it to mean, do I feel really relaxed about this? Or like, is there any sense of me that is afraid? Because I think any time God asks you to step into something significant, of course you're going to be afraid, but we felt a real peace about it.
And God's confirmation often comes after we've stepped out.
Yeah.
And again, I've seen people where you don't make the move or the big decision until all the T's are crossed and the I's dotted. But that never seems to be the way God works. We had to step out with some major things open up. Like we hadn't bought the building at Gas Street. There was financial masses of money to raise and huge question marks and unknowns. And God was so faithful, so good, came through. But I think if you expect to have everything clear beforehand, then there's no faith.
Yeah.
There's no risk. And again, I think the danger is sort of a risk-averse people in the church. I think we're risk-averse at times. And I also think we're pain-adverse. So willing to really sacrifice to step into tough, dangerous places. Which is maybe moving on to another big decision, which is around for us adoption.
Yeah.
Because that was interesting because we both came at it very differently. I mean, do you want to say your...
Yeah, and I think just to say, and anyone who's adopted will know this, there's a tension for us in talking about our adoption story because it's our story, it's deeply personal, and there are aspects of it that are rightly really private.
Yeah.
And we're talking about our little girl here, and she's only little.
Yeah.
So she, at the moment, only understands so much.
Yeah.
And also, she hasn't given us explicit permission to speak about it because she's 4.
I did get to sign that waiver.
Oh, did you? But on the other hand, in not ever speaking about it, we feel like we're potentially missing out on an opportunity to share with people how beautiful and wonderful and challenging and costly it is to adopt, because we would love to see more people adopt, quite frankly. And if we never talk about it, perhaps we're sort of blocking opportunities for the Spirit to really stir that in people's lives.
And we were so grateful to people speaking honestly
who are
about,
open,
because that's how you learn and see. But God,
so that I just wanted to say that.
Really
so because again, I know if other adopters might be listening to this, you might think, "Oh, just be careful." We really are aware of that dynamic.
Yes.
And
in fact, great.
Yeah. Anyway, just wanted to say that. So we will speak about it, but to a certain degree. I think that's probably what we're trying to say. So I knew from a very, very young age, before we were married, before we got together, I just had such a strong sense that one day I would either foster or adopt. I didn't know when, I didn't know how many children or any of that. And that never left me, essentially, is probably the long and short of it. And then you shared similar feelings, didn't you? Or certainly you weren't opposed to it when we got together.
Yes, I don't think I probably thought about fostering adoption. I've always sort of, I guess, been passionate and, love seeing sort of young people, young children flourish, to be honest, and thrive.
And you've always been really good with kids. Like, you just have a natural connection.
And certainly, like, abuse or of young children would always just deeply impact me. I couldn't bear it. So there was obviously a compassion there.
And that was it for me, that basically anything I read or watched or saw or heard about that involved children being in places where they were uncared for, unsafe, would just wreck me. I mean, wreck me. I would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And there's this quote, I'm going to get this wrong, but I don't even know who said it, but something like, pay close attention to your tears, because they'll
reveal the passions and the callings in your life.
Exactly. They show you what God's put on your heart to care for. And so I was aware that I would always have this incredibly tearful response. I was like, okay, Lord. And I just knew it was part of the story. And again, this is where we have to be careful, because I don't want to paint us as these sorts of, these saviors. No. Do you know what I mean? I just knew that God had put that on my heart. Anyway, we then had our first 2 biological children. And we actually explored adoption after our second son was born.
More you, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, as in you reached out to the council.
Yeah, I reached out to our local authority, and I think our son was only a year at the time, and they said, you have to wait till they're 2 to begin the process and whatever. And then actually in that time period, we really felt like there were more biological children. And again, we don't take it for granted that for us, biological conception happened very easily. And so we had 2 more biological children, but then we had 4 children, and we had them in pretty quick succession.
Yeah.
So we had 4 under 5, when they were little. And so really our hands were full. You were training to be ordained. You had a full-time job at HTB. Life was full. And so it just didn't feel like the right time at all at that moment. Then we moved to Birmingham, planted the church. Again, life was just full. And actually, if anything, our youngest at the time, the youngest of our biological children, when we moved to Birmingham, it coincided with him starting nursery. So all the kids had been at home with me until they were roughly around 2.5. And then, it was time for them to go to nursery.
We were then leading the church together. You were really flourishing and thriving, and
felt like that was what was right for the church.
I was loving leading with you. And
I was too, so that's good.
Fantastic. So then I guess I thought, that window's passed.
Yeah.
We're getting older.
Yeah.
But then
our kids were getting older.
But you strongly still felt...
And I just was like, Lord, maybe I've got this wrong, or maybe I'm to serve in other ways, really serve vulnerable children in another way. But no, that desire to adopt or foster was still there. If anything, it got stronger. And it got to the point where I was like, I just don't think I can live another... This sounds very dramatic, but this was the strength of feeling. I can't go another day without acting upon this. And I say I knew what it would cost us. Of course I didn't fully. But I wasn't sort of... what's the word? I was naive, because until you do something, of course you're naive. But I wasn't like... I'd say I was maturely naive, as in... I didn't think it was going to be sort of all unicorns and rainbows.
No, I think to do anything massive, you need a level of naivety.
Yes.
With the church, I think there's a naivety in childlike. My fear is that I lose that. And then we play it safe. I want to believe for the impossible.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. No, exactly. But what I'm saying is we didn't go into it with our eyes tight shut. Anyway, essentially that wouldn't go away, but you just weren't feeling it.
Well, we'd talk about it, and I'd feel really overwhelmed and anxious by the thought. 4 kids is a lot.
Church, a lot.
The thought of you stepping out, everything about it made me feel anxious. And then I'd say there were 2 things that were really significant. One was we were away. We were at Bethel, Reading. And we'd gone together and hang out with the guys. And I was really praying, because you were like, this is the thing.
And can I just say, from my side, I wasn't trying to persuade you.
No, that was amazing. You gave me space.
Because I knew I can be quite persuasive.
Yes.
I know that. And that's one of my strengths. But I also knew that to try and persuade you or to talk you into this would only backfire. That actually you really needed to have your own sense of conviction, and the only way that was going to happen was for God to speak. And so all I could do was pray, and that's what I did for a long time.
I was really asking God to speak to me. And the only thing he said was, trust Rachel's instincts.
Delighted.
Very scary thing to base your life on.
Charming.
No, but I was like, that was all I got. And your instincts were yes. So I was like, okay, well. And then the second thing was, we watched this film called Lion. And this is why creativity in movies and music is so important. That's why I'd love to see the church invest more in these things. But anyway, watch this film, which is the story of this kid in India gets separated from his
birth family.
He's adopted into this amazing family in Australia. And when he's old, he's trying to find his
Birth family.
mum with the support of his adoptive parents, and it's a harrowing but redemptive and amazing story. Anyway, I sobbed.
Well, we both did.
We did, yeah.
I mean, hysterically sobbed all the way through it.
Yeah, you a bit more hysterical.
I was a
than
bit,
me.
yeah, true. Yeah,
But,
okay.
and I remember watching that, and off the back I said, okay, we have to do it.
Yeah.
We have to do it. Interesting. Two major things in my life, the writing of Here I'm to Worship, there was that inspiration of that film Green Mile, which really reminded me of the song.
I have no idea about this.
Never listened to anything I do on songwriting. But I've talked about it before.
Fine,
but
okay.
That's the story of, I guess, about, substitution, someone falsely being accused on behalf of others. And I came back and it's like, I'd half written this song about Jesus, that, and I've got to finish it off. And then off the back of that, then stumbled across the chorus. And so I with that song have been finished, had I not watched that film, who knows? And then this movie was like, okay, I've got to do it. The third thing I think was important in this, which we then began the process. You go into endless meetings, endless kind of, you go through this training where they basically try and freak you out. And they have to paint the reality of the picture. And so you're there sitting there thinking like, oh, what? But I prayed, God, if you're in this, that I just keep having peace.
Yeah.
And I did. They talk about the realities, the possibilities, the enormities, the emotional challenge, all of the time, the energy, they give you horror stories. And even in all of that, peace, peace, peace. And so a bit like the Birmingham thing, like keep walking through, the doors keep opening.
Keep going.
Keep going. And then I remember, I think I wondered at the back of my mind, there's still a sense of this might not actually happen.
Okay.
So we might. And I remember we had the social worker around and they said, we've got
there's a little girl.
A little girl.
And it'd be worth saying we adopted through our local authority in Birmingham, and we chose to go down the path of early permanence, which is relatively new, and essentially it enables a little one to have permanence from a very, very young age. So technically you are fostering the little one whilst decisions are being made in court around the future. And where there is a high likelihood that that little one will need a permanent home, an adoptive home, it's really beneficial to the child, because it means they experience essentially attachment and permanence from a very, very young age, which all the psychology will point to that being of huge benefit. Yeah. And of course, what it means is, as the adopters and the foster carers at that point, you absorb the sort of the risks of the process in order to provide early permanent stability and attachment. And so that's the route that we chose to go down. So our little girl was very, very young when she came to us.
And she was how old, a week? No, not
She was a week old, yeah.
We can go to the hospital now to meet her. And again, I can feel like the... And I remember like driving. I mean, you were like buzzing, as excited as you get. And I was like, oh, okay. And because it was COVID, we had to go in one by one, all the,
PPE and all that,
gear and everything. So you go in and you come out. And so I'm waiting, like, what's going to happen? How's this going to be? Am I ready? Have I got what it takes? Real anxiety. And you then come out and you're like buzzing. She's gorgeous. She's amazing. Oh.
I'm in love.
Yeah,
I'm in love.
Yeah. And then I go in. Gosh, I can really feel that. And just picked her up. And I just felt this overwhelming peace. And I think, holding this little baby, it was like, it was almost like I was scared of her. And it's like, how can I be scared of her? She's this beautiful little girl who needs love, who needs to be cared for, believed in, championed, invested in. Why am I scared? And I think my whole mindset just shifted, and I've just felt this deep sense of peace and love, and all that fear just drained away. And, I'd honestly say, best thing we've ever done. I mean, look, I think, and there's lots of things that I could be proud of in ministry, or things I've been a part of that are amazing. Songs and churches and
our biological kids.
Oh, they're incredible. But I guess the difference is this is something you choose in a different way, maybe, I don't know. But this is the thing I felt most proud of and felt God's incredible pleasure in. And what it's done for our family. Again, like the dangers looking at it, we're the gift to her.
Yeah.
She's the gift to us.
She's the gift to us.
And this is the stuff you weren't thinking through before, but like watching our, the older kids, Phoebe, Tim, Judah and Lois, the way they've loved her.
Oh, my goodness.
The way they've invested her, the way they've poured themselves, and the way she's just become one of the gang. I'm so proud of them. And I just know that that's going to put in them just a hunger and a passion to give of yourself for others. And she's such an incredible gift. She's the most hilarious. And I think the depth of my friendship and relationship with her has surprised me. And so, best thing we've ever done. And God's been so good, but she's brought endless joy. Of course they're going to be challenged, but there are with every child.
Yeah.
Everybody, there's different moments in their lives where they're figuring stuff out, but...
And she has a different story.
Yeah.
And obviously, that it just wouldn't be appropriate to talk about that now, but it's obvious, of course, she has a different story, and that we'll navigate that with her. But it's the most beautiful thing. And, we don't feel like the superheroes in it whatsoever. If anything, I know it sounds so cheesy, but I do genuinely feel like God has given us the privilege of being part of her life, being her parents. I just love being her mum.
And I again, a bit like moving to Birmingham, starting the church, the thing that could have and perhaps nearly did hold me back was fear.
Yeah.
And I just think, again, when God calls you into big decisions, don't let fear stop you. I mean, don't be foolish and crazy, but that's why all those, friendships and Bible and God speaking and peace all are important, but don't let fear or the worry of what the sacrifice will involve stop you from making these amazing decisions that are so life-giving. And we've got to finish, but I would want to say to anyone listening, I know adopting or fostering it's not for everyone.
No.
And I remember hearing Rick Warren say this. I went to lead worship at Saddleback, and he was speaking, and of all the things he was speaking on, it was on adoption. And he said, not everyone is called to adopt, but he said every follower of Christ, he believes, is called to ask the question, should I adopt? And I think more people need to.
Yeah.
I think
let the Spirit say, rather than making the assumption.
But that's the way of Jesus. That's the call on the church, and I love seeing more and more people do that. And again, there's so many adoptive parents. And for some, the adoptive story is very, very painful, very messy,
very painful and challenging.
But again, I just think if you're listening, ask God, dare to ask God, could you be in this? Is this something you're calling us to? So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we said 2 or 3 examples. The third example was about whether or not. I was like, we need a much more down-to-earth example.
A kitchen extension.
How did we discern whether we should extend our kitchen?
That could be the cliffhanger. Cliffhanger that leads for everyone.
But it just feels so unimportant right now. So
Yeah, it really
if
does.
you are trying to weigh up a decision about whether or not to extend your kitchen, you will be bitterly disappointed.
Yeah.
But hopefully
Maybe we
this
could
has
do
been helpful.
Maybe series 3 could entirely be about how do you
Ha,
discern.
ha, ha. Anyway.
Well, hope that's been helpful. Thanks for listening.